So we're going to go ahead and install Popcorn here, and going to go in. I update 2023 always, just to make sure I'm always up to date, because I keep that one as the fallback theme. And then we can delete the other two and install Popcorn. And while I'm going through doing this licensing, we can go take a look over real quick at the Epic Gardening homepage. As you can see, I mean, they've got this header, and then they've got the menu below it, and then a cool hero section. And we'll go over how to do those overall and get something similar in place. And then as you scroll down, each section is kind of unique, and this we can show how you can build sections like these and kind of get yourself set up so that you can run yourself. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Alright, so now that that's installed and updated, we can go ahead and jump over to plugins and add Gutenberg. I always like to make sure it's there, especially with the newer Popcorn version with the expandable table of contents for post blocks. If you like table of contents, you definitely want to install the Gutenberg plugin. So what we're going to do is jump over into media here and set up real quick, because I like to make sure the images are good enough quality to work on the screens. So when you go into settings, you go into media, and typically these ones come real small by default, so I typically will make the thumbnails like 640 by 480 because it's a good size, especially given today's monitors, that will work for using on images to cut down on size of image on the display. And then for medium, I'll set like a scaled up version, so 1280 by 960 is just double the thumbnail, and then large is 1400 by 925, which Mediavine has showed as their suggested discover traffic size. So now we're going to go ahead and jump into the editor and move over to the front page itself. So this way you get started, right? Total fresh theme, and this is where we're going to start our build from. So for us, we want to go ahead and change and replace out the header, because we already know it's going to be more of like a side-by-side with the image and content, and then we're going to have to adjust it from that point forward. So we'll just start with the normal inline and adjust from there. So now that we've got that in place, we're just basically going to look at duplicating it and then doing some cleanup to get that second row. So instead of having the two pieces here, we're going to go ahead and basically make a second row itself. This way we can get both of those two, and we can play with the size and spacings to get it correct as matching here. And this way we get the menu, and we can pull the menu out of that first group and pull the first group out of this one to get rid of that hero, or get rid of the logo and tagline. And this way we just move this to justify it all to the center, and now that menu is closer to theirs already. And on this side you're going to go edit, remove the tagline because they don't have one. So you go into tagline and just go ahead and delete that, and then over to the other group is where the menu is. But we can add after here and change over and add the social icons and give it a try for what it looks like. So had to change that over to a row because I need it to be aligned to the side of each other. And so now when you look at this whole thing, you've got two separate independent rows, and you've got a menu in both, but we're going to strip away all that padding to get them closer in alignment to each other, and to get rid of the problems of having them be too tall overall. Alright, so now we're just going to go ahead and button up some of this stuff and clean up some spacing. So overall, you can see how there's kind of white space around everything. So inside the settings and layout, we'll drop the block space down from 24 to 12 to kind of pull it all up closer together. This one, it just kind of helps get it as close as possible without being overwhelming. Alright, so now we can go ahead and set the primary color, because the default is that red/orange. We're going to go ahead and grab this color over here, get that green that's their prominent color, and then set that as the actual replacement for this, so that way it's our primary color. The secondary should be that same yellow that they have throughout. We just have to find one where it's not going to go lighter on us, so it might take a second. Oh, we can get it from there. Okay. And that way we get both their colors and we get that green and gold setup. And then when you're looking at the third, you're looking for what's the majority, so that's this brownish color. And that way we've kind of got the... Oh, I didn't get that copy. One second. Let's go back and do that a second time. There we go. Okay, so now we'll replace that one. That way we've got all three of those main colors that we would expect to see, and then we can make that white later if we choose to. So now that we've got those colors and we kind of have what we know we'll need for this to get going, we're going to go ahead and grab their logo. You can't grab it off their site because it's a SVG, so vector graphic, so instead I'm just going to go find it here on Google real quick and get a cloned one that we can use. It's not exactly what I'd want to do. So now that we have that logo, we can go ahead and save this and just go ahead and add it into our site icon area. This way it'll be nice and pretty for us. And so now what we're going to do is go take a look at this top section here, which as you look on their site you can see is basically this shop button. And so we want to get rid of navigation, but we're going to go ahead and add before. This way we have a place to start putting that stuff, and we can delete navigation out. And then what we'll need to do here is to really think about what's going to be over here, which is going to be a search area and then a button. So for us, we can add before again, and then we can go over here and just search. So /s search will bring it up fast, and that gets us the initial placeholder. There's some customization to this that I do later. As later Josh pops in here, we're going to skip past the search where I fumble around trying to find the one click that I needed to find and move forward. So I mean, here what we're going to do is just add a button, which is pretty easy inside Gutenberg itself. And then we just have to do some stylings around it itself. So inside here we can go ahead and play around and tweak it a little bit. And so we want to change the color obviously to match theirs, and we can change the text, but we want to go ahead and tweak these a little bit. So we know that that's yellow, so we can go ahead and put that in place. And then when you take a look, you see shop, so we can easily add the words for shop. And then after this, when you go look, you can change text to match their same color. This way you kind of start to achieve that little button. So then you can go look at the border, and if we increase the radius to like 45, you get kind of like that smoother side, and then we can play around with the padding itself to try and get it closer to their size. It's a little bit rough controls here. If you wanted to be exact, you could use custom CSS to tweak and adjust all of this, but it gets the job done fairly efficiently here. So looking at the front end refresh, you can see the shop button now shows up, and you can see it's got a little bit of a hover effect. So we're going to go take a look and see. I don't think hover exists inside the settings, but you can go to color in the three dots and look and see what additional add-ons are there. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the social icons. So while we can't do numbers, we can add the social icons themselves. So what we'll do is put in place that they open in a new tab and then go through. We don't have numbers, so it won't tell me that there's 9.6 or any actual numbers, but we can still have the links all here and focused for us. And you'll note that they'll be gray if they're missing on the front end. So if you don't give them a link, no matter how many you put in here, you won't see them on the front end. They will only show up if they actually have a URL. So we're going to put all these ones in place from his site. So we still have Facebook and Pinterest to go. takes a second to go through all these and make sure you get everything. And then once we have that in place, now we've got the core that he shows there on his page. This way you can kind of get that same feeling, so preferably you can put in a little bit more block space, kind of, and give it a little bit more room. It's a little bit hard when we don't have much. We're just trying to get some pieces in place. When you look at the front, when you refresh, you won't see anything because they actually don't have URLs. So note yourself, when you do this, you got to come in here and put in a URL at least. So when you look at the front end now, you'll actually see those show up. So they are there, and it makes it way more front and center for everybody who visits you. So, I mean, it is a good thing to have regardless for yourself when you're setting this up. But we can go take a look, and since all of his are green, we can actually do the change in color so that they're kind of more aligned to the normal color scheme. So like when you go do these, you can go ahead and look at his, and then you can change the color to that green that he uses standard, or in this case primary color if you were to use something similar. And this way you maintain that same look and appeal as he has. And from there it would be more about looking at, if you want to make them small in size, which is probably closer to what his is, and then at that point you can have that right up front next to your logo, trying to get people to come visit your other social forms. So what we're going to need to do is just give that an anchor. We'll leave the search for now, come back to it. I've got a fix that comes later, as speaking from the future. So now we're going to go ahead and jump into the menu though, and the menu is interesting just because it's a full width separate navbar itself. So we're going to go ahead and add a bunch of these links just to get ourselves all caught back up. This way we can get a clone of what they have for their main menu and allow us to kind of work with something similar. I'm going to fast forward while we do this. As we come around to the end of this and we get the product reviews, we're just going to go ahead and take a look at how this all looks in navigation. We're now going to make sure that we're kind of giving space between. We're going to try and see if we can't figure out how to make this look closer to their side. And as you can see, they're pretty well spaced compared to ours. So there's a little bit of play in the settings as you try and figure out what you're going to do. So really what you want to do is just choose out what you're looking for. So the overall typography is here. I'm just trying to find something that'll match with kind of what their look is for the text that they have. So when you go take a look, you get a chance to see, does this make sense for the site as a whole, to kind of make those look more as theirs look. And I do feel like that kind of looks a little bit closer. When you inspect theirs, I mean, you can see everything that's used. So if you go to computed, you can actually see the font that they use. So they use some specific font, so we're not gonna be able to get that one because it's not a Google font. It's not anything that's standard, so we're just gonna have to go with the closest match possible and just try to adapt. As to height, we're pretty close on the height, so we can do some tweaks a little bit more to try and get this all aligned, but it's most definitely more about figuring out the right spacing and the right size. So make it a little bit bigger font. This way it'll get a little bit bigger in the menu, and then you can do spacing to try and get some gap between them by using different settings depending on where we're at. So the easiest one is to go over to that third tab on the navigation, it's like the 50% colored in circle, and you can actually change that spacing, or you can play around with the group and the spacing. But I think inside here is the best place, and you add this and it kind of gives some gap between all those things. And then when you save it and you look at that up front, you start to see the space. But you see it's like not much, so it's a little bit more painful than you would think. So we're gonna just think about this and try and understand how we can readjust this the best way. So what we'll do is first jump into the group. We can add some padding to the top and bottom because we do need it to have a little bit of space from that top section, because we do need it to not be just that line height. There you go. Get a little bit more padding out of it so that it's got a little bit of a nice look around it. But from there you've got to do some tweaks itself, and making space is probably one of the most irritating things that I've dealt with inside the full site editing version of this. And while we're in here, we'll change some colors to get us back to white, get rid of that grayish background and give us a better clean defined look. We're going to go ahead and skip past the trying to get the spacing right. I'm going to start building these submenus. So there's the submenu. So this is how you can easily just add on these lower ones. I'm not going to make all of them. I'm just going to make a few so that we kind of can get a look at how this actually works out on the front end. So we'll just copy these names over, and URL will be a £sign as usual. So it'll just be a link to nowhere, and it gives us a chance to go see what these are. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward until I'm through all these. So what we can do now is we can actually go to typography and add case. If we add case, then we can set them all to just be default uppercase, and you don't have to worry about what you're typing. And I like this one. I know everything is going to be uppercase, so I don't have to try and keep track of typing it all that way. But now they're all there, and you can see the little submenus exist. That way you can kind of get an eye for everything. Theirs are a little bit more pretty, and if I dig in and do some CSS, we can do some more of that if we want to. We'll see where this goes until then. So coming back over to here, you can see it's still got a little bit of spacing. We're not going to be able to get around some of it for now. We're going to go ahead and skip around. I was trying to work out this search icon, but I figured it out. You just click on this stupid little button over here, that one right there, and you solve that search problem. I just figured it would be good to give you the update real quick and not show you the 45 minutes I spent beating my head against a wall for something so simple as the dang search icon. So what we'll do here is just check and see it on the front end. So when you click it, it opens the search dialog. So you can go ahead and search, and then we're going to go ahead and look and see how theirs is like edge to edge, and ours does not go edge to edge. We've got this open space on either side. So what we need to do is look at changing the size and trying to figure out how to get it pulled all the way out, and there we go. So now it's pulled out all the way to the edge of the screen. This way we get that look that we were missing before for having it in a container as opposed to. So now when you go look, pull it in a little bit, it gets a little bit tighter, and it looks more about like what theirs is. So this way you've gotten through most of that part, and now we're going to go ahead and tweak these a little bit and adjust the simple things. So giving it some casing to make sure it's uppercase all the time. We can shrink the text a little bit and play around with some other things if we want to. And then we've got the hover effect we still got to think about. So for me, for hover effects, I tend to think about what to do. Inside here, our sizes are in different formats, so it's going to be a little bit off from what size theirs is. But it's pretty easy to tweak around to get pretty close. And when you're building these, it's kind of a keep it close. You're not trying to replicate it like as 100% a perfect clone, because they are using way more tools than just the full site editor. This just showcases that the full site editor can build 99% of one of these sites without all that overall effort that people think it requires. So what we're going to add real quick is that border on the top, so that there's a little bit of separation. Inside here, you go down to border, you go to the chain, and you can just get to the top. So we'll pick out like a gray And then we can add the 2 pixels, just some kind of thickness to it, so that when you refresh, you'll see that little separation exists. Because he does have a little separator there. It just kind of gives a little bit of visual distinction between the two. We can look at the padding again to try and work this out and give it a little bit more of that white space around it, just so that it looks more like a clean menu that's got some kind of separation from that top element. So now we're going to start looking into the hero section itself, and we're going to go ahead and use the already existing hero section, but we're going to purge out some of the stuff that's there and reorganize it a little bit. This way we can kind of just get that reuse section of this that we wouldn't get otherwise. And as you see, there's like edge to edge, and it's got some stuff that's set up there. So we're going to go ahead and take a look. Let's see. So once we jump into here, we can go ahead and take a look at the actual section. So we're going to go ahead and open up the sidewall and get this to be 100%. And now we can go ahead and work on changing out and getting rid of the space and getting rid of the radius itself. As you can see, that wasn't where the radius was, but when we go try and change it, you just got to find the right place. I think it's actually a class in this one, but for now we can go ahead and look at the other pieces and move ourselves back to look and see. I think it's a class, but I can't remember which one it's on. We'll find it when I'm digging in here. What we need to do is convert some of this stuff over. So when you look, you see this is actually listed as just a default based on area. And what we want to do is change it over to be a section. Each thing on a page should have a clear defined HTML element, so this should be a section. And that's just good layout itself. So once we've got that part, we can look at the front and you'll see it stretches. Now we just have to get rid of that border radius, which I swear is a class, so we got to go to these groups and find out which class it's on the advanced side. I'm assuming it's the first or second has the class assigned. There we go. Nope, that's not it. But we can get rid of the drop shadow. Scroll down. Ah, there it is. There's the radius. We can get rid of that. So now that we got that part taken care of, it goes edge to edge. And what we can do now is to grab the images itself. So we can get his section, so that way we have the background itself for ourselves, which you can just inspect and get the source for the image. And you can kind of see how they break it down. So when they look at it, you can see that it looks like it's like a 50-50 split of content versus the image. And then it's got a cool little SVG or other image as that swiped angle. So we'll grab these real quick, just so we have them and can use them. And then we can go down and take a look at more than likely an after. I'm assuming after is the actual location where that comes from. So there you go. As you scroll down, you'll see there's a little after, and those are typically something added in addition. So we can grab this and save that also. And then when we come back over here, we can start actually assembling this to look like that. For their side, it looks like they just did 2 divs basically to cut it into 2 pieces. For ease, I'm going to go ahead and use columns because it'll work well when it goes to smaller sizes. It'll auto move it to the next row and clean itself up. And it's the easiest one to try and explain and keep you organized, because you can easily swap it if you need to into different sizes, so you can change it to 60-30 or split it however you want with relative ease. So now that those are there, we can go ahead and move those sections in there. So the cover is like a whole background, which we don't really care much for, but we'll keep it for now, just in case we decided later we wanted to change that. And then you move the group itself of all that content into that first column. That way it's all within that same section, and that way we can have the image on the second side. So now what I'm going to do is just take a look, right? It's a 50-50 split, it looks good, but we do have some extra groups and some things that are taking up some spots. So I'm going to fast forward while I kind of just dispose of these extra groups because they don't really serve a purpose. They just add to load times. So now that I've moved it, you can see you can just delete out that group because it isn't actually doing anything for us. So really when you look, you just kind of want to have an understanding as to what's doing what. And see, this one's the actual section element for us inside the hero, so we do want to keep this. And that way we have a clean HTML layout for the front end, and it's loaded as a section, so displaying itself correctly. So we can go ahead and save that. And then what we need to do is there's if you look at there's a little bit of padding, so we can add a little bit just to get it pulled in. The problem is if we do it that way, you pull in that cover. So what we need to do is go inside and actually look at doing it inside the container that provides that image for us. So we can go down here and take a look at within the cover itself, just pulling it in, and this way we get that little bit of space on the sides that they have on the Epic Gardening site. So you can play around and see. Most of the time you're just looking, trying to figure out what works for yourself, and we just need to figure out what works within this page to get it close to their layout. So in getting rid of all of the padding, you saw it pull all the way to the side. So maybe what we'll do is just add it specifically to the columns. Pull it in. This way you start to get that little bit of pull in. But it's going to be more like a 6, I think. So now you're trying to make it look a little bit more like that one, where it's not all the way to the side. It's kind of got that little bit of breathing room off of that left-hand side itself. Then we can kind of take a look and see what we see. I'm pretty sure it's somewhere around 1200. Most of these are pretty reliable. Yeah, that's 1208. That makes sense. Alright, so now we can go ahead and tweak this a teensy bit more, and we've got the layout at 100% across the board, which is what we really want. And what we need to do is adjust the columns to be at that width that we need. So what we need to do is go actually select columns. So you go inside cover, because you really want that last thing to be the thing that's set to a width that we need. And I need to switch over to the blocks. Oh, no. Gotta switch over to the blocks. So you gotta make sure you don't get yourself lost in this template itself. You need to be inside the actual block setup. And then what you can do is go up until you can find layout where you can set a width, and then you can set the width. But I think this will end up pulling in those sides. Yeah, that's what we don't need. So what we need to do is change this back, leave that normal, and then we've got to go set the cover itself maybe. So this one we set the cover itself to 1200, which leaves our width wide but the inside content limited. That keeps that stuff to the center more. So now we can go real quick and do the same thing inside the hero, inside the header. You want to keep everything kind of looking the same across the board. So like here you'd want to do the same 1200. That way the front end of them looks about the same itself. So you keep some kind of container look with sections that just break out and go to the edges. So now that we've got that part, we can jump back over here. What we're going to do is just add the image, but first we want to go back over to the cover, and we want to first go ahead and go down here to clear media. So down in the bottom right, you can do clear media. Once you do clear media, it clears out that picture. That way we just have no background now. And now you can go ahead and add a cover, which I think works better in this circumstance. So once you've got this in place, you can go ahead over to the settings and turn the overlay all the way down so that the image isn't grayed out. And then you can go take a look at the front end, and you'll see it's a little bit high on the words. So we're going to go ahead and fix that right quick by just taking the column, changing it to middle line instead. This will dump it down into the middle, giving you a more balanced look. So what we're going to do real quick is jump into here. We're going to go ahead and add that green background just to match the other side. We can take a look afterwards and see how the front end looks. And instead of being gray, we jump into that green. Now when you look at yours, you can see their image goes all the way to the side. So we do have some tweaks to do still, which is to look at that padding on the left and right and pull it back out. And then look at pulling in just maybe the left hand side itself, because we don't want to pull in the picture. We want the picture to stay where it needs to be. So in this case, we can just add padding on the left and go with that same 6 that seems to be prevalent in here, and try and work on adjusting where this will go to. So obviously the column wasn't the right place, so we need to go tweak this again and adjust whichever one we need to get that width correct. So when you go through this, you're sometimes just gonna have some trial and errors figuring out where you put that spacing on that's causing you to have your image issue. In this case, it's the columns. So what we need to do is go back up to the cover and change it to not use the inner content there. This will at least pull that out to the side again. So now we get that image way out to the side like it is on his site. Now it's just readjusting the left-hand side to better space out what we need to. And what we'll do is jump into the cover still, and we can go take a look real quick at some of these settings to get this dialed in right. If you move into that cover, you can go ahead and delete out that extra text, so we actually don't need it. And then inside here, you can actually go in here and add an image. Since it's an SVG, I had to go add it through the media library instead because I have Safe SVG installed. That'll allow the image to be sanitized so it can be used up front. So now you can select it. And then in adding it, I realized that the color was different than my actual background, and I realized that I missed the gradient, and then I just had to go back over to the cover. I spent a while trying to figure out where that color was, and then it was my bad. I missed that first cover and that little selection to go over here, make sure it's that green, and that there's no problem with the overlay, or you can delete the overlay itself. The problem is the overlay is what's killing this all, and it was just a bad decision when looking at layers. That's why you want to minimize where you put colors as much as possible and only add them when you know you've got exactly what you need to. So here I'm just trying to start adapting a teensy bit to look and see what it looks like on the front end, and that way we kind of get that look. And we know it's way too tall because his is not that tall, so then you start looking at the little differences. So we can go take a look and see, and I'm going to use the ruler personally once I get a chance, I think, to just see what his height is, because I think I just need to tell the image a max height to be. So when you go back over here, this is when the ruler or those kind of items come in play, because you can do this and just measure, and it's going to be like 400 something. I can't remember offhand. Yeah, 460, 480, yeah, something like that. So that's what you can use, and then you can go set your height to just say the max of that height, and then it kind of pulls it up. So when you go refresh again, all of a sudden you get more of that picture and more of that, angle that you wanted to have, and it looks nice and pretty. So then you can do a little bit of adapting here, and again, it's more cleanup to get that padding just right. And we just want to take a look at left, right? We just need to clear up left so it's got that 6 gap and just kind of pulls it away from that edge and pulls it into the content. Then we can go ahead and take a look and see. As you can tell, there's a little bit of padding that might help that. But when you're playing around with these things, you're kind of trying to adjust to figure out what works best for as many things as possible, because this editor doesn't have a lot of built-in sizing changes, so you can't just set it to look differently on desktop or tablet or mobile. You've kind of got to figure out what's the perfect blend of the 3 and then adjust minimally with CSS after that. So you just got to work out the perfect place for yourself. We can close that. So now I can just grab this title and put it in place on ours as we go through this. That way we have a chance to kind of see how it'll look on ours. And we can adjust and clean things up and get it organized itself. Because otherwise you're going to have a hard time if you don't match these up, especially when you're trying to get these to look really similar. So this way you can play with your sizes, you can play with the fonts, you can try and see if there's a good setup for this to be. And we don't want that original one, we just kind of want the two yellow because they're both yellows in the first place. So we're just going to make it easy on ourselves and then fill this one in and duplicate it. So this way we can go up here and save ourselves some time and go over to this group itself and just grab our button. So we can copy, and then we can go down to the other button and we can just insert after. There we go, get that plus, there we go, and then paste. That way you can just have the same button. You can delete that one, and then our buttons are all similar then at that point, and you can just clone this one. As you can tell, I made a bunch of little tweaks there, but I ended up putting it right back to where it was before. So now I'm just going to go in here, we're going to duplicate, and then replace out that other button with the text from their website also. That way we've got both of them matching in the first place, and this just gives us a easy way to look and see. And when you go to the front end, it's starting to feel more and more close to how theirs looks. And you can adjust spacing and some cleanup, but it's getting to be pretty close to there. They have custom fonts and some few things that we're not going to be able to make, perfect, like the YouTube video play button. I'm not sure how you could even accomplish something like that at this point within Full Site Editor. So now, since their buttons have that specialty hover, we're going to add a class called button-hover that we'll use basically to give it that look when it gets hovered on. So we'll add it to both these buttons. This will be custom CSS, so we're going to put it on all these buttons just so they're all the same, and then save this. And when you go to the front end, you can see nothing happens still, but this is where you can start using the CSS for the customizer real fast to add those colors. So that little basically fade on the buttons on hover with a little ease in and out. All you have to do is take a look at theirs. So for yourself, you can look here and you can turn on hover, and then you can see what hover effect they actually apply. So you're just looking to see what they have inside here, and this way you can kind of get an idea as to what they're applying. So as you scroll down, you start to see, so they just did a 50% opacity, so we'll grab that part. And now on our side, we've got to go turn on custom CSS. So go into Popcorn, and then you're going to have to go down and scroll to Legacy Customizer and enable and save. Now when you're on the front end, you'll have access to the customizer. Inside here we do additional CSS, and now we're going to add that dot button btn-hover, and then what we're going to do is drop in that opacity, but we're going to add the semicolon hover at the beginning, because we're going to say basically on hover we want that to look like that. So now you see you get that quick hover change effect for theirs, and you get that chance to see that it's being used. When you look inside their shop and you start to look a little bit real quick, you can see the ease function they use too. So it's on the hover side. When you go look, you may see it inside the next container portion. So there's a transition with the opacity and the ease in and out, which is the ease part is what makes it go somewhat delayed into being transparent. So what we can do is just try and apply that inside here and give this a try with just to look and see, because this way I just want to see what this looks like when we apply it. And we can refresh and then take a look and see. What we need to do probably is actually apply that inside the same hover setup, so instead it's got to be inside the hover section, and that'll slow that in. So there we go, we get that slow in and we get the hover effect. And it seems too rough for me because it bounces back out versus there, so I just wanted to go take a look. We can tweak this instead, and what we really want to do is have that transition effect exist on the standard button. I try a few things here, but in the end what you need is what I'm going to fast forward to, but it's a easy 2 lines. Now what we can do is look, as you'll see the hero is a little bit set down from where the menu is. So what we really want to do is just find the hero itself, and we're going to just add a hero container CSS class to this. That way we can do some custom CSS to just pull that up, that little bit that we have set up for the margin area. So we'll add .hero container, and then in here we'll just do margin top. So we'll add margin top and -12 just to pull off that margin, and it'll pull the menu, it'll pull us up to the menu. Now that it's pulled up though, we've got a little bit of a spacing issue, so what we want to do is come back in here real quick and just find where we can add some more padding back in so that it's kind of got a little bit of breathing room between it and the content. So now when we refresh, take a look and see, now it's got a little bit of space between it instead of being butted right up against it. Beneficially, inside here you can change this to show all of them instead of individually, so we can actually shrink the top a little bit because it already has some like pre-built looking padding on the front end, and that way it'll center it more between the two and give you a more uniform look. Now onto the menu real quick, we can do some block spacing and increase this or decrease this to get some space between everything. But if we move it to like a 6 like everything else and try and refresh, we can see it makes it drop onto 2 lines, so we don't want that. Now it's just finding the right place to get it back down. See, there we go. 5 looks like it gives us about the right spacing, the max we can, unless we go rework to give ourselves a wider area than that 1200 pixels that we set for the header. So what we're going to do here then is just tweak the fonts a little bit. I'm trying to figure out what's the right size to get as close to them as possible. I just switched to custom instead of the pre-built sizes to try and tweak it a little bit more and get it a little bit more close. So I think in the end 0.95 will get us pretty close, but you just got to work with what you have and try and figure out what'll get you about what you're looking for. And then as you go through, you can kind of get a grasp of that. And then after that, you can go into the sub settings and add in the appearance and font family or other things, just to try and swap out some of these and see if there's something that looks, you know, better than the default Arial. But you can always use custom fonts or other things if you want to. There's a link on the docs for Popcorn as to swapping out custom fonts if you want to use different Google fonts, if you have something specific you like. I just wanted to go through and see if there's anything that kind of fit better. I'm pretty sure in the end I'm just going to end up back on Arial. But you can play around and figure out what works. In the end, Arial's pretty straightforward and always renders quick for everybody, so there's no load since every computer has Arial by default anyway. And then just wanted to make sure that the template itself, like overall the default was using that Arial font also and not any others. But as you can see, coming together and buttons highlight like we expect. Things are working well. Now we can go ahead and jump into the next section, which is these 3 posts and that cool hover effect to just pull in the corners. This is just a pretty straightforward block of posts where we have this 3 section of cards. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get rid of those. And what we're going to do is rebuild with a post structure instead, just so that way we can start to align this and get that put together correctly. So for me, the easiest thing is to go into the group, and you can actually basically acquire this, so you can grab out a section and move it up. So in this case, I just take those 3 sticky posts out, and we're going to go ahead and move them up and delete the featured post header. This is going to give us our query loop, which will give us 3 posts and give us a format to easily toss in some content. So from here it's easy to check, and you can make sure when you go in, if you go to the query loop, you can set max and make sure 3 items because we don't want 2. We don't want an offset for anything, so that's what we want to see. is just 3 items specifically. We can save that so we know we're going to get those 3. And then you only want sticky posts. So like this section, I'm assuming you're going to choose sticky posts to fill in that section. So within this group, you can see the card itself is the group, the image. So what we're going to do is go ahead and tweak this one real quick, make it sticky so you can see it. And this way we'll get something on the front page once we get the content going. So what we should do is check in here now and make sure our section is set up. So we got to go ahead and back into the editor. Oh, yep, and see, we lost that sticky section. It just went gone. It went rogue. So what we can do here is go ahead and search. And for those who don't know, you can just go in here and actually find things. If you want to search, you can just like sticky, and then look, there you go. You can just go ahead and grab that and drop it back in, and now we can go do that edit that we did before. So we gotta go back into that query loop and make it 3. Make sure we're set for 3 columns also so that they don't roll over. And then now you've got that example on the front page. So now when you go refresh on our front page, you would see that post. But this is how you get that first part together. And now we can tweak out the size to try and get them to work within the space. You'll notice theirs doesn't have content, or doesn't have like a excerpt or anything. They basically just have the image, and then they have the category it's in, and then they have the title itself. So we're gonna have to tweak this card a little bit to get it to match that, but this is why these examples are so good for everybody to see. So once you're in here, again, it's looking at how the layout's done overall, and need to make sure you don't stay in the template itself, because it's going to break everything for everybody. But trying to figure out if I can make it wider or not, because I don't think it works as well at that width as I expect, because it pulls everything in again. So see how it breaks everything? That's why you got to make sure you're not inside that main template setup. Instead, I got mixed up in trying to get all this stuff all done, and I moved myself into the template instead of into the block itself. So in that top right, you can tell I'm in the template instead, like for the whole site, because I'm on the half circles and I'm not on the actual blocks menu. There is a problem within those. So now I realize I've messed up. I'm going to go correct this again, because you got to go set that back. 100 VW is just saying 100% wide, basically 100% of the width of any monitor. So widescreen, 4,000 pixels, it would all be the same. So now I can save that and correct that. But now we can jump back over to the block and start actually fixing the display of the block itself. So these groups we need to change the size for. So these ones you might want to look at that 1330 instead of going and changing everything else. So now that we've corrected the front end, we can start actually fixing some of this back end, and so we make it that 1300 pixels that we were looking at before, and add some space just to get it away from the top area a little bit. This way it's got a little bit of spacing away from everything, and it's got that height. So now we can go ahead and purge out these groups, these classes. The shadow itself and this full height we don't need at this point. We're focused on building a very specific layout, and it is going to match these ones. So this way you've got to go back in, and now the card, you want to look at how this is all put together and try and adapt it overall to make sure it's cleaned up. So in this case, we can delete out this excerpt because it's not a part of that card. We do need the title, but what we need to do is add a new after here, or add before. So here we'll do add before. I hit the wrong button. So we can select and look for category, so slash and then category, and you can see the actual category section. So we're going to want the category, and we want to move this up so that it's in the middle. And now we can go ahead and make the size small, so it's kind of matching what they had on their setting, because it's just small. And then make the setup itself for the case so it's uppercase. That way you never have to worry about it. Now when we go refresh, you'll see it now exist here, but there is no image on that hello world post. So we're gonna go ahead and I think get ourselves an image here in a second, because we're gonna need it. But we can change this text while we're here. They've got it pretty big on their page, so we'll play around with some sizing, see what gives us kind of a closer appearance to what they're looking for. And then for these ones, we have this card. We can go ahead and remove the padding on the sides if we want to, and this will make the image be flush to those corners, so to the top and to the left and right. And this way it kind of has that image picture that they have on their side. Then we can go ahead and play around with what we want for this overall setting. So if we try and figure out the right perfect setup, we can get this to look. So what we're really going to do is just leave it at 33% and remove the height. That way it'll force it to take up the full 33. And technically at this point, you get that same image that you need. So what we need to do now is go get a copy of their featured image so that we can kind of work with something similar as we're working through this. So grabbing that image just gives us a chance to go apply it to our site and put it on our post. This way we can have something on the front end that matches up to how they'd have something on the front end too. So we'll go ahead and edit this post. So now that this is up, we can go ahead and go down to the featured image for the post and just go ahead and select from the media library real quick. And we'll get this in place, and this way on the front end now we can refresh and we'll get this loading in here so you have a chance to see. Plus we can see it on the front end now. So there we go. Now we've got a better chance of seeing what's there. We can go back to the home page here, and this will give us an opportunity to really compare and contrast as we're going through, trying to make sure this is all the correct size and placement to work for us. So for this, we're going to go ahead and turn off that radius, because we're going to need to use a custom CSS and hover to apply the curvatures. But for that, we'll make ourselves a class on here that's basically the sticky area on hover, and we can apply that as we need to these images. So now we can go into conditionals, and like this one, we can go ahead and dot and sticky hover. And then what we're going to do is just need to apply this radius. So we can look at this by inspection, and again, turn on the hover. We can look and see what they're actually doing on hover when we go over an image. This way you can kind of actually see where they're pulling on and make an understanding of where and when they're actually changing out that radius itself. And if you didn't get the right one, you can move up the image, move up the pieces until you find where it's actually tied to. And this way you can come through and use what they've already had to build to find the right thing for yourself. More than likely this is tied back to the picture, but this way you guys get a chance to see. When you're going through here, you always want to kind of understand where each part is at, and turn on the hover again. Like when you move through this, you lose hover, so you got to go turn hover back on. But what you'll see is you eventually find exactly what you're looking for, which is the border radius in the top left and bottom right is adjusted. And then there's an ease in out kind of like on the button itself, so that it kind of smooth scrolls in and smooth scrolls out. So you'll see it right there. So there's the transition on the border radius, basically easing in on the border radius on hover. So we will need that part, because that part's going to control that hover effect and the smooth roll in it has. we can get that part down, but what we need to do still is the radius themselves. So now it's just locating where they did those radius. And you could just type it in yourself. You can actually search and look in these because the radius will be in here, and that way you get exactly what they used, so you get a similar look and appearance. I'll come back to this when I find it. 1 second. I couldn't find it, so instead I just am searching for Google real quick to get the best way to actually cover these corners correctly. So this website is from Mozilla, works real well, gives you some easy answers. So inside here it just gives you what the way to approach that top left radius is. And so we're going to go ahead and hit customize, and we're going to go ahead and add that into this. So we're going to give it the 45 pixels, and then we're going to paste it again, but we're going to swap out top left for bottom right. So that way you've got both of the two corners. So instead you just switch out those two sides. And then same thing, we're going to go ahead and put that 45 pixels onto there. And with the transition, we should see this work. Now we can go ahead and come back over to here and hover. So when looking at this, the flaw in doing CSS, you have to target your actual element, and sometimes the stuff in the back end of Gutenberg doesn't actually go against the object you think it is. It's going against a container above. So like in this case, I've been trying to target just that sticky hover, but what I need to do is target specifically the image when it's hovered. So see, when you add that image to the hover itself, now it's working. So what I need to do is go change the custom CSS specifically that I built to say target the image inside the sticky hover ability. So once I do that, now when you go down, now you'll get that effect what you're looking for. So now we've got that effect, and we can go through and get that nice pretty layout every time we're looking for. And then we can change it to ease in out to make it ease when it's happening and when it's done and fading back out afterwards. That way it'll be more smooth. Now we are going to go ahead and add in just the hover for the image and move the transition over to the main, because this way when it's not in a hover status, it's going to work better and do what it's supposed to do all the time. Because right now it's only going to apply that when it's on the hover. Now it'll apply it all the time, and you get that nice smooth in and out for it, making it a perfect image and matching what theirs does. And since we're here, we can actually just take a look at how wide their images are being rendered as. It looks like it's around a height of 326 and a width of 440. So we can play and set this as like 415 in this side and kind of correct it. So inside here we can set this as 308 and set the width as that 415 number, and just kind of get about the same width and height that theirs are, which will pull it in a little bit, and it makes it way more aligned to the same image size that they use on their site, giving us a good match for them. So now we can go ahead and look at spacing around some of these other objects and getting them just dialed in and ready to be used. So now we go back into the back end, we can go ahead and add some padding around the categories just to give them a little bit of that space that they have, getting it away from the image a little bit, making sure that there's plenty of space between them. And then we can do the same thing and just look at what they have here, which is its black text, and then it turns green on hover. So we can go to the link, we can make it black, but we can change the hover color and set it to green, so this way it mimics their color change, and this way that is all aligned. And just like with the words, we can do the category as the opposite. So on their side it's green and then it hovers as black. So in this case we can go over to here, we can actually change the link color for this. We can make it green and then make hover black. That way it's a full match for what they have on their side and giving us a pure clone. So when we refresh, now we get the black and we get the green, so that way we get that nice little pretty match. Alright, so what we're going to do here is go take a look at this second section. We're going to start into here, and then I think we're going to go make some extra posts, because it's not going to work well inside here if we don't have a range of things to show inside these sections. But what we can do is jump inside here. We're going to delete out this button because we don't need to read blog. And we can open up this one. We can go ahead and delete out the latest post because we don't really want that header anyway. We can go ahead and worry about that later. But this does expose the issue that we don't have more posts to show, And so what we really need to do is go make a few more blocks of posts, so that way we can easily view this. So I'm going to go make a few and I'll be right back. Nobody wants to watch any of this, so this is just on super speed roll, 800 times the speed to get through making those 3 posts right quick. So now that they're there, we can go ahead and take a look at this moving forward with more posts and content itself. So what we can do inside here is go ahead and make these all sticky, and that way they'll show up inside that sticky section for us. Now we can go to the front end and look and see how this looks. So there you go, all 3 exist, all 3 get that nice pretty animation effect, and it gives us a chance to go through and be happy with what we actually have. So at that point you can go ahead and you can tweak this, because you could add some more space between. You can make it a little bit wider. A little bit of space will give everything a little bit more breathing room and get us really close to what he has on his site. So this is how you get through these sections. And we can do a little bit more cleanup and go through and try and fix some of the fonts, because his may look a little bit smaller and a little bit more spaced apart. So on our side we can go in here, and instead of just dealing in absolute fonts, we can actually try these out, a few different of these fixed sizes, and then maybe go ahead and provide ourselves some more custom sizes just to get it right. So on this one, it looks like they've got a little bit more space itself, so we might be able to do it with font sizing and maybe a little bit with like spacing itself. So let's shrink it just a teensy bit, see what we get, and then we can adjust it a little bit more and get the fine tuning of these blocks to be more correct for what we need. Inside here, shrink it again, grow it again, try and figure out what makes it look how you want it to look. With most of these cases you can't make an exact match, but sometimes smaller will look better, sometimes larger looks better, and you just got to figure out what's your need to get this all right. So on our side we're going to go ahead and pull in just a little bit on the sides. This will help those fonts get better, but we're going to do them individually because we don't want to shift the image. So on each one of these we'll pull them in a little bit, and this just makes sure that they align better with that image on the side and don't stick out past it. So when you go in here and you refresh, now it'll pull it over a little bit and get them more underneath. So we might just tweak this a teensy bit more just to get this more comfortably aligned where they're kind of inside that image, which will also help the text flow to the other line and clean it up and look right that way also. So again, once you do those kind of things, then you got to go try and change your fonts around again, maybe sizes, and figure out how you get it to be exactly what you want. But then once you know you've got it right and you're willing to pull the trigger, we move on to the next section. Alright, so this section is the editor's picks. So this section obviously has a different background. It's got a title, and we can probably make editor's picks a tag specifically that would be added to a post. So in this case, what we can do is take a look at these, and we're going to go ahead and move this over and add in our header. So in this case we want to do that editor's choice, so we'll do heading, and then we can put in editor's picks, and we can go ahead and move that up. Oops, move it back inside, move it inside that group, hopefully. We gotta change the color, it's not very legible right now. But this is that first section, so we got to go back, we got to look at our text, change it over to that black color because somehow it got moved onto that tertiary, and then we got to go fix the headings for the same problem. So when we go over to headings, we can find the setup for this. Where did you go? There we go. Yeah, I just clicked too fast. Alright, correct those, get them back to the right colors. This way we've got this section that's the latest post to get us this section of content. And we can get that background color, so we get that background like they had, a little bit of space. And then we go look at the front end. There we go. And now you see it's got a nice separator. It's got a little bit more space around it than we have, so we can always look at adapting our spacing. But this part, you gotta be inside a group to get the actual full spacing. So for us, we either need to move it into a group or look at adapting what we actually want to do. But it's not bad. It's just one more thing you got to tweak as you go through. So when we go look at theirs, you can see it's basically 4 posts, and it's got a main big post area and then 3 other posts to the side split into different grids. We can do it in a lot of ways. I'm going to do the easy way this time, and we're just going to focus on building with post groups itself. But there's a lot of different ways you could do this. We're going to move this over to a section, and then we're going to start working on these other pieces, which is that we need to have a big section of posts to get replicated. So otherwise we're going to have problems. So I'm going to go make a lot more posts. Be right back. Alright, as we cruise through copying and making these real quick, we can go ahead and jump back in. So now we got all the posts. So when you go to scroll down, we've got these 4 additional posts now that are actually inside editor's picks. This makes it easy to work on this section because we actually have a section of content here. So inside the builder we'll have to refresh, but we are getting it to come together now. So once saved, you can refresh, so it'll pull in all that example content, or all those posts and everything will be in there. And then you'll get a chance to see everything as it should be. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and move through retagging these all editor real quick, or this way it's just easy to go back through and tag them within the example we're building. So in here, we don't want latest posts anymore. We're going to go ahead and really, I think, start from scratch on this section because this one won't work for us anyway. So we're going to pull out our editor's picks because we still want that part, and we're going to just delete this. Since layout isn't anything the same as to what we're doing, I'd rather just start clean and not have to try and rethink it from the ground up. So we can add after now, and we can actually just start building as we need to. So this will obviously be a query loop, and what we do is we build the one image we want to pull, and then we can retweak that for multiple blocks and then skip posts to get it all perfectly done. So in this case we can do add after, and we can get the structure started to be set up. So we add that before, and we'll start trying to assemble this setup itself. So I'm always bad with these hotkeys. If you're good with them, you can be fast and efficient with this, but I try to do a row for the longest time here, and then I end up moving over to a table because this was not allowing the sizing to happen how I wanted it to. So what we did here though is actually build this though, so I don't want to stop you from seeing all this part. So we're going to switch this down to 1, and basically we're going to clone this over and over again, because what we need is a query loop that has basically only specific posts. So we want to exclude, or we want to include everything, but then we need to go set filters, and we need to go use taxonomy because we built that editor's choice. So we want to make it only editor's choice will show up inside this section. So only those 4 posts, the most recent 4, will show up inside this section. And then what we do basically is we go and start to replicate this block. So over here, once we've got this all in place, we've got our one, but what we need to do is we're going to need to make at least this one plus the one for the other row. My hope was that we could do one block on the left and then basically do one similar one on the other side. The problem is that this is where the row started to fail me, is that it didn't want to do grid very well, and I wasn't going to keep fighting grid when there's other options. But it's all fundamentally the same for building it correctly in the first place. So you need to set your items up to 3, and then you do the offset, saying you want to skip at least one post, because that one post is in that first section on the left. So you need to offset because you don't want the 37 drought tolerant ones to show up in the right hand side also. But now you just can group things so that you can have control and understand what you've got, and set them 50-50, trying to get them both to take up the same amount of real estate. But as you can see, it already makes them layout funky because it's only actually giving it 50% of that space that they have, instead of making it 50% of the overall width. So what we do here then is we can go ahead and have it wrap, right? We're hoping. And then this one we can start building. So the card itself, we want to do a cover on this one, because like above, this template itself needs to have that image background of the post, and you can't get that without actually creating that cover section. So we're going to go ahead and add in here before the title, and then we're going to change this over to cover, so /COV, and now we can start looking at these. And what we want to do is the image itself should be the featured image, so you can just use featured, and that way it's going to be that drought tolerant. We can pull the title up inside it, this way that's inside there, and then we can bring that date up inside there. Oh, they don't have a date yet. We can purge that. So without a date, we don't need that. They just have the category. So we can easily go ahead and add in that if we want to. But we can just delete that part because we don't need that text box. And we can start assembling everything we need to inside there. So what we do now is we just actually go change that to full width. So down below, there you go. We can change it to wide width or full width and just see how each one fits within the space. And that kind of gives us what we're looking for in this one. And we want to change the text so it's legible, but it's going to be under link because it's a link. So what you need to do is go into the title, and you want to make the title a link. Now we can go in and we can fix that problem itself, because now we can go in here, and now that it's a link, we can actually set it as white. There we go. That way we've got the link as a white text on itself, which is what we really needed. And then inside here, I'm just going to go grab that categories because it's easier than remaking it again. We can just go ahead and copy. And then inside here, we can just go ahead and shrink that back down, and then we can add in here, and we can just paste. And then go into that box and just click paste. There we go. And it's white, and it just dies out a little bit, so we can actually just go change this real quick inside the link colors and change it to white. And then we can change the link one on hover if we want, by just choosing to hover white, and then just clicking on the white and scrolling the transparency down a little bit. That way it'll give that little gray when it's hovered over. So now we can adjust that font. We can do a little bit of tweaks to try and get it to look kind of what we're looking for. Once those are in place, now we can have the front end and go take a look at what it actually looks like. So it does look pretty good. There's some spacing issues and some sizing issues really to get it all perfect, but for a first run to get that first 50% done, it looks pretty good. So as I was stating before, I go through a whole bunch of this. I sped this up a lot, but I went through like an hour and a half of trying to get this right, and then I ended up deferring over to columns after the work that was done in those first ones was done, and basically this is just trying to structure them correct. So I just wanted to jump past all this so not waste your guys' time, and then skip back into when we start assembling this all within the right containers. So we add after, and then what we do is move over to columns. Because the row was just not working. It wouldn't sit itself flat no matter what it did. It just kept failing to display anything in a way that was really useful for anybody to be able to get consistent performance out of. So once these are in place, then it's a little bit better chance to try and start working from the two sections that are correct. So now there's one that's got 3 posts and one that's got 1 post. So instead of fighting this hard fight to get this all correct, now we can start really assembling, getting this done correctly. So in this case, what I wanted to do is just try and do one with 2 columns and the other one. So you've got the one big one, and then you've got the other 3 in the 50-50. So one goes into a group at the top, and then one goes into its own sub-columns below, side by side, to try and get itself back to just the 1 post that it's supposed to be. So in this case, you've got all these posts working for you, and then we can copy this, and then we can go add it into this other column. By just... don't do that. Click paragraph, then paste. So, and then you've got to do the offset again because this one should be offset by 3. So that you've got all 4 posts there. So this at least gets you in place. Now it's more just trying to tweak and adapt each chunk so that it actually fills in the space correctly. Because as you'll see, they all work, but they all are broken a little bit in how they display. So in this case, you start doing the little tweaks to try and change the content itself, because you're trying to figure out how to make the cover and the post be the size you need it to be so that it pulls up and it allows that other one to be as tall as it needs to be. And then we proceed to go 20x faster yet again, because this has still been something. This is probably the hardest part of the whole build overall. This took me far longer than everything else combined. So I can go highlight those sections if anybody wants. I'm working on a post so that there's a place to get the CSS and kind of see more of some of these settings in particular afterwards. This section, this one little section took me, I think, like 2.5 hours to get right inside this editor. And in the end, I'm very happy with what I got, which you're going to see in a second. But it most definitely was a test of my ability and temperament to get through. So here you go. So this is what it looks like now, after I had to go back through and clean it up 10,000 times. Now, that's as close as I think the full site editor can get to what it looks like inside the regular Epic Gardening site. But inside here, you can kind of see the breakdown. So I have the 2 columns still. I made the group for the 1, and this whole template itself is inside that side. And then I just went through and I organized where they were going to display. And then moved to the next side, and the other column itself branches out into 2 groups. One group being that top post that goes all the way across, the bottom one being into the 2 columns that run side by side. This way, it's all aligned and done and contained, and it works perfectly. I can, you can assign those block breaks to make sure that everything is structured the same, and it all lays out in a nice proper grid format. If anybody wants that side specifically, I can grab that section of code. That was a sanity buster. But it looks nice, and it's done without any custom stuff to make it work on the front end. Now what we can do is just tweak a little bit of that layout and get it just as dialed in as possible. So we can go see some of those words are still a little bit small versus their stuff. So we can go ahead and tweak some of this and get it a little bit better organized. So for these ones, we can go ahead and just change the overall padding and get some of the breathing room for each of those two items. So what I need to do is go into each one of these and bulk out the padding to like 3 probably, and then 3 again. That pulls it away from that wall a little bit, so when you look at it on the front end, it's pulled in and it's not buried up against that corner. So I've got the same on the other one, so we can take a look at tweaking those just the same way. But this is the little tweaks that go with trying to get this just right. As you can see, most of this is not painful. It's more just getting it just right so that it works when you're trying to get it all dialed in. These all have selectors of where they can exist within a card, but it's the same real problem in the end. You're just trying to get perfect dialed in where it makes sense, and then you just tweak it over and over again just to make it all look how you're trying to get to. And making exact matches is almost never exactly possible because typically there's far more tools used in a builder, but it starts to look pretty darn close, and you could run them side by side, and a lot of people I bet would still mistake one for the other. But you can make these bigger, try and get that big wording on that first one, and it doesn't even appear that's big enough, so we might have to go into custom, or we can try and let's go that way first, try and force it in. This section is actually probably my favorite section. Inside here, once we've got past this editor's picks, we start building the next section, which is a way more fun section to me, because now we can move over to the featured reads section, which is this cool background section with just an inlay for the posts. And really this is easy to replicate, so we can build all 3 of these pretty fast, and they're adjustable later if you want to switch categories and add in whatever content from whatever ones matches for you. So what we do is we'll just start new. So we're going to add after, and we're going to make this into our next group. So inside here, we're going to go ahead and delete out all those columns because we don't need any of that. And we're going to change this name. So from here, change that over to featured reads. And this way, we've got this new section that we can start from. And real quick, we can just save this and we can go take a look. There we go. And as you note, there's a little gap in between. That's because that's that 12 pixel thing coming back to bite us in the rear from the overall settings. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a class real quick. That's basically going to manage removing that actual global offset itself for spacing. This way we can just easily add that to anything we want to pull it up and button it up against the previous one. So you'll see it's still there, but what we can do now is we can go in and customize and actually just pull that up until we get exactly what we want to match that 12 that we know it was added. So again, period, and then the paste, brackets, and then what we'll want to do is do a negative margin. So we'll do margin top, and then we just go ahead and do the setting for 8 pixels. We added 8 pixels on this side. So now when it pulls up, it just buttons up that space and it's gone. But that gets us all cleared up. So now we can use that same class on anything when we need to pull it back up and clear out that 8, because it clears out this spacing. 4. So we can actually make it 4. So now when you go look, you get that same, it's gone with 4 pixels. So you just have to match it to that side. So if you change that global spacing, then you'll have to come back in here and tweak this CSS itself. But now that space is gone and it looks clean. Now we can jump into the fun part of this, which is to go ahead and start building in this columns layout here. So basically you're looking at something that's probably 40% on one side, 60% on the other, or like 33 and 66%. So we can add after, and we can add columns, so /col, and then we can pick one. 3366 is about good to start with. We can always tweak from there if we need to. But what we'll want to do is think about that background exists as a cover, so we might have to go insert a cover beforehand also. But they're going to use that post, so what we can do is just borrow that same post template from above and cut down our overall work by just re-borrowing it. So we can copy that group, and then we can go ahead and just add that in here. So add a paragraph and then paste, right? Then we can go in here and we can actually tweak it back down to 2. Because what we need is that to be 2 instead of being 3. So change that back down to 2, and then we got to change the query loop itself to only return 2 items. And there you go. And we can just clear out any settings for sticky. So we don't want only sticky. So we can go change that from only sticky to everything. So now you have that basic layout already working for us, right? With very little work, we're already in play. So now if we take a look though, we've got to get the rest of this all assembled. So now, I mean, the easiest part here is that we just need to go figure out what we've got as the background. So we know that that post section should be white just due to how it's laid out already inside that view. And when you go look at this, now we get that little bit of extra white behind it, and it's starting to look a lot like how theirs is laid out. While he can scroll off page, I don't have the ability to scroll off page inside the full site editor, so we're just going to go with 2 posts within these, because they would be your 2 newest ones. I'd assume if you're well distributed, you're not going to do this. You're not going to be posting only into one category itself when you're getting to this level of a site. But inside here, we need to go ahead and create that cover, right? Because we need an actual image for this whole thing. So we can use the media library and just choose that same image just so that it's easy for now. And then we're going to move the whole column structure inside this. And then we can go ahead and delete out that paragraph. If you can't see, you gotta scroll to the right. It's just hidden behind the... So we can delete that. So now it's all existing within this one big cover. This kind of helps give it that background that they've got on their side, on their side, so that you got a really clean view of everything. And then opacity, we can just change and tweak it a little bit. And they gave it a green, so we can actually change this overlay by using the green and get something similar. And then that way we got the same thing already going on. So now we've got this easy column to start using. And for us, we can go ahead and just use these, align it to the middle. That way it looks cleaner over time. And then what we'll probably want to do is start working on changing this section itself, because we didn't want to copy a column. We wanted to copy the paragraph. So now they're right underneath each other. Okay, so now they're corrected. So now we can copy out that section of text that they've got, and then we could add a button. And when you look at these buttons, it's kind of the same as the others. We got some work to do. We can make this size bigger, or you can change it. I mean, you could put this as like an H2 if you wanted to. It probably is better form as an H2, but I was more focused on making the layout work and not overwriting any heading structure necessarily. It's probably best served as an H2. So if you're rebuilding this, I would probably make those H2s. But there we go. So now when we look on the front end, all of a sudden that's all transformed, right? Now we're starting to get that color all the way across. So when we look at this, we can see getting about right. What we need to do though is go look at this cover and see if we can pull off, try and remove this padding, add some to the top and bottoms, and then possibly remove that left and right so it goes all the way to the wall. But it's not all that necessary. But yeah, there you go. Yeah, there we go. 0 pixels. We like that. And then what we can do is increase the left side so we can pull that seeds off from the wall a teensy bit. Now when we go look at the front end, now we get that. There we go. That's cleaner looking. And when you go into here, you can start to play around with some of those. Now we get rid of that group, and now we'll get that sides all the way to the edge. There we go. So now we've got the sides all cleaned up. The button needs some cleanup work, but the group itself looks like it's pretty close. We can give it a little bit of padding on the sides, give it a little bit more gap off of the edges, and really it's just tweaking these and playing with them a little bit to try and adjust and get it looking pretty good scaled. And then the right we want to remove because we want it to run all the way to the side. So there we go. So now it's starting to come together. And what we can do here is edit that column and look at giving a little bit of padding onto... No, that's not the right one. We need the other column. Yeah, that column, Josh. Alright, onto this one, just so we can pull it a little bit off of that side wall too, so it won't run into the image. But then we can pull off that left-hand side that we did on this one. We can pull off the left-hand side. And that way it stays around the same position, but now we get that line break sooner and that little bit of air, white space between the words and the actual white post content. And then we can adjust that font size if we want to, but we can work on the link first. As you'll see, it's just clear and then it highlights white. So we should be able to do that in here pretty standard with just the default controls. But what we do is we just go tweak this. So inside here we make outline, which is just a click inside popcorn. And then what we can do is really take a look and see. We need that radius on there. And then basically we're in place. I mean, we can tweak a little bit of font size and some padding and try and make the buttons a little bit more specific, but I think a lot of this is just some personal fine-tuning as to what you'll want it to look like on your site. Then the only big thing that would be left is on that white background side, we actually have like a border radius on the bottom and left-hand side that's rounded on the Epic Gardening site. So what you'd want to do is just look and see. We can add some padding around here so that things aren't running right against each other. Give them a little bit of breathing room. And then we've got that bottom left corner we got to pay attention to. As you see, it's rounded. So we can go in real quick. This is simple. We just grab that whole group, then go down over to border and radius and just bottom left. 45 pixel. Maybe 60, I don't know. 90, I don't know, we'll see. I think 90 is close to maybe where it's at, I don't know. We'll say 60. But now it looks like theirs. And it's got the nice rounded look, and we're through basically the brunt of this whole card itself. So this section is again done and much more straightforward than many of the other sections were. But inside here we can get rid of that filter, because we will want to go filter by taxonomy, because you'd want to make it the seeds category, but we have to go make it. So you'd go in and you'd make a category that would be seeds, right? We'll save it, and then inside here you can filter on that seeds. That way only the posts that are seeds will show up inside there, and then the view all you could route to your seeds category page. But we don't have any posts inside there, so let me go make a few again. I wish making posts went as fast as it does here. Alright, so now that we have a post, we can actually go see this on the front end, because we'll have something to put in there. So we can refresh. Now that we have something that's a seeds content, we can just refresh this. And when we get this refresh, scroll down. Now, oh, did I forget to apply it into this? Oh no, I did. Yep. See, so up top, I forgot to turn off only the sticky. So we want to include sticky if they're there or not. We just want the newest post from this category to show up. So now we can go ahead and be saved in through this one. The benefit of doing that section though means this next section is really easy, because basically it's a copy of the above, but just without the background. So we can actually just copy this 100% and just copy from this group and duplicate. And then inside this one, really the hardest part is that we go inside this section and we just delete the cover, and we can delete out the featured reads portion, and in a heartbeat we're basically almost complete immediately. As you can see, super fast and efficient when you can start utilizing the thing you built the second time over. All you'd have to do is change out your query loop as to what you're interested in it being. So in this case, just gotta get rid of those white parts wherever we've given it a white background, and just let the background carry through. And then you see, there you go. Now we just swap out these little pieces and swap out this part. And I mean, basically this is done. You just want to change your query loop to whatever your new query loop would be, and invert the button so that it's the opposite, and you're basically done. This is why when you do these cards right the first time, it becomes so much easier the second and preceding sections, because that side's already done. So it's already there. And we can delete out the featured reads because it's not needed on this one. And there we go. I mean, it's about as fast as you can be. We can look at this and make sure we've got the remove global spacing there. And on the front end, we just refresh and boom. They've got a little bit more space maybe. You can tweak the space, but it's not vitally important. But the cool part is that the next section is just a duplicate of the above section from the seed section with the background. So we can actually just go copy that other group yet again, duplicate, and we can go ahead and just move that underneath. And now when we go down, we're already done. We can delete out that little featured reads part. And delete out that. And basically, this is done. I mean, all we have to do now is go in and change the title over to reviews. And if you're editing this for yourself, you would want those posts to be from the reviews category. And you'd want that button to point to the reviews category. But you've already done all of the legwork in that first block. So this one is done near immediately, which moves you forward. And now you've got that section done. So into the latest post is our last section of the homepage minus the footer itself. This one's actually pretty straightforward. This is almost like the normal latest post section itself, but just in 2 columns instead of being in 3 columns. So in this case, since we're through all this section, we're going to jump into this and try and move ourselves forward and into the home run stretch of this video. Alright, so compared to the previous sections, this one's far more straightforward itself. Now we're just going to paste that block back in there, so this way we've got that featured items, and we can just basically prune out the section we need, because really what we need is just that post section that has the post with the corners on it. So for us, what we can do is really simply just kind of separate out these chunks. So we can take the columns outside of the cover, that way we can just remove the cover part because we don't need that color. And then really within the columns itself, we really only need the posting side, so we can actually just grab this group and we can pull it all the way out under the featured section, which then pulls it outside, and then we can just delete the columns because we don't need it any longer. And this gives us kind of the bulk layout to start basically getting the look we need. So when you go look at the query loop, we need to change it now because we need to do like 10 posts, right? And then basically we need everything to be inside this, so when we go take a look, we can go make sure that the query is running on all posts. So we need to just ensure everything exists there, so we can include, that way we get everything. So all posts exist inside this area now. So when we go look and now see that that's the example latest posts, we can go replace that with the featured reads so that they're aligned. And then once you get down to here at this point, we can just go ahead and strip away that white background that we had on everything and then remove it from the actual sections below. So what we need to do is on the template itself and on the group and just remove off that background. There we go. And now they're already starting to come together. And at this point, really the only thing that's truly missing is to go back into that template and give it the excerpt that's missing now, which is easy to add. We can just type in excerpt and you'll see it as an option right there to click. And now you're already in business. Now it's just like the other times, it's more of a cleanup and organize. So we've got to go move those back over 3 so that one aligns the same way as the others. And then we can go back up and take a look, make sure that we've got this all set up correctly. We want to give it a little bit of space, so we pat it along the bottom a little bit so it's got a little bit of separation from the post underneath it, given that gap. And then we can save. We can take a look. So now we've got this section, and the images aren't the right width, but I mean, short of the image width being set, we are pretty much done. So what we can do is go take a look at his site, right, and inspect and kind of do the same things we've done before, look and see. So it's rendered at what size? So when you go look, it's what, like 600? Yeah, 642. So what we're looking at is really around that 642 width is about the sweet spot to get the two at the same size. So what we need to do is just change this to 642, and we can change that to the 452 that it was, just so we get that same sizing. And now those are the same size on that one as they are on his site, and at this point we're getting real close to just being aligned, other than maybe some font sizing and some spacing issues, and adding an excerpt on, just because it doesn't look like any of the posts have had an excerpt added. So we can go through and add the spacing, give ourselves a little bit of padding around everything, and just make sure that everything has a little bit of air to breathe. And then we can probably shrink this bottom one a little bit, because we've got the bottom of that card already there. Or we can swap out and drop some of that off of the bottom of the card here, so that way it's not all on one side. And then you can see we got a little bit more space now. And then all it is looking at kind of how big that font is. We can tweak that a little bit and increase it, and maybe go find a size that's going to work for accomplishing what we're looking for. So this way you refresh, and it didn't increase all that much, so really we need to go a little bit bigger to get it kind of in alignment. So jump it back up to the next one, and then refresh. That's looking a lot closer to what they have. So what we're looking at is kind of just trying to match it up as much as possible. And then what we can do is go back over to their post and grab an excerpt. That way if we grab an excerpt, we can go put it on our post and kind of get a chance to see what that looks like. So what we need to do is go into the post, and then we need to go down there and just grab one of these. I'm not trying to match them. I just want to get as long as that is, so we can go ahead and put it in here and see what it looks like on our end. So now we can go back to the front end. We can go see what this looks like when we scroll down. So when we take a look, there is that all laid out nice and pretty, and kind of gives us a way to look. That might need to be a little bit bigger. One thing I've noticed about the full site editor is that while Xserve is here and it has a font size, it doesn't actually take it on the front end. It always stays the same no matter what you set it to. So the only way I found out to go around this is to really basically just make it a custom class so that I can target it with custom CSS to change it. I'm assuming it's just a bug in Gutenberg itself. So we're going to just add a class basically that's just to change the excerpt to be a little bit larger font size. So we'll go with a pretty boring name. It's not typically good to start with just generic wording like excerpt, but what you can do is if you do this, then you are ready for pointing. You just want the name to be unique. So we go to the front and we can go take a look and customize this real quick. So when you go in and you put it in there in the first place, you can make sure that you target the actual paragraph when they're sub inside, because the class is actually on the div outside. So you want to focus on the paragraph inside. It didn't change, but I realized when I went to go inspect it this time that it actually errored over on the right hand side because I actually missed my colon that I was supposed to type in. So now we can go fix that real quick by coming down here and just changing this to make sure we've got the colon after font size. And then when we save this, we can actually see it. And this is probably way too big, but we can then readjust from, whoa, yeah, okay. A little bit large. Probably can shrink that down a teensy bit and go with a number that's far more normal. So we'll just change it here so we can see where we should adapt it to. I kind of like how this 1819 looks. So we'll go ahead and choose 18 and just go change this custom CSS down to 18 from 24. And now that front page is all done, now we can refresh. Scroll back down, you can see everything is in place. And it's looking all nice. Each one of these images gets a little cool border when you scroll past it. And all we have to do here now is really looking at the bottom. There's a read more, or yeah, there we go, view all articles button, which is the same hover as everywhere else. So we can, again, instead of creating something brand new, we can actually just go create the buttons as a last part down here. And then we can just go grab and clone our button from above. So that way it's all the same without having to go remake things again. So now we can go up though and grab that copy and make our life easier. Yeah, 1 second, scroll up. Since we already have these, we might as well just go grab a button and not have to reduplicate. So we'll go ahead and copy and scroll all the way back down to the bottom again and just replace it. Paste. Alright, so now we can just purge this bad one out, and then we can actually delete one of these extra buttons, and we're in motion already. So now we move that to the center and retitle it back to the view all articles. and that would just point to your blog page wherever you set it up at, and add a little bit of spacing underneath it and call it good. So now we've just got this footer, which is actually not all that crazy. This is actually fairly easy and straightforward. So we'll go ahead and edit the footer and just basically purge out what's there and rebuild it, because this can be done in a much easier way to just get ourselves all done, which is what we need to do is remove that spacing yet again. Get these first pieces in place. Now we can change this and add that black background. And we can start assembling, replacing out our sections with the different versions that we need. Since theirs is basically a 3-section already, it should be a fairly easy just cut and convert over some sections and be up and running pretty fast. So when you look at their side, you've got like basically a 50% section and then 50% for the other two, so like a 50, 25, 25. So really what we want to do is just look at these columns, and we can twist these columns around. So when you open these up, you can take a look. There's 3 there. All we have to do is go kind of change each one of theirs width and basically reutilize them. So in this case, we can just delete out the stuff that's inside, because we don't care much about that part. Remove all the miscellaneous classes that are here from Phil's original build. And then we can go change out the color itself. Remove out the radius. Clean up everything. There we go. Now we've got one section ready. We can go ahead and add that in there. Paste and make sure we set the text to white. There we go. Make sure we set the text to white. And then basically duplicate that on the next thing, so we can go ahead and grab that group. Make our life easy, just copy this. And then go to the next one and then just paste. Or add this and then delete the other one. And then on this last one, same basic principle again. But we can set this column 25%, set this other column to 25%. And that way we've got the right size columns. So then you go back in and it's just basically cleaning up and listing out some links. It's much more about just getting the pieces in place. So you can grab this whole copyright and replace out what we have in the bottom as a copyright. And delete all that, and then just add a text. Paste that in. Same thing, you gotta go change the colors around a little bit and get that all done correctly. So take away any CSS that's not needed. Go change the background out from being white. Change the font color over to white. Hey, look at that, you're already coming together. So really what we've got is a couple lists of things that we can make over there under the connect areas as to being the pages or posts, which will just be fake anchors right now, and then a quick learn to grow section, and an email sign up I'm not going to do because it's going to require, you know, whoever you get for your email person, but it's easy enough to just go paste in the chunks. And then we can just duplicate it a few times. That way it fills up all that space and it has that same look of what they had there. And then we can move over to the next side and change this name over to company so it just matches. And basically we're already coming together at this point. So we can just fill in a few of these so that we get the same names. We can purge out the links from copying the text in the first place. And we can swap out these names just to get them, you know, pretty close. So we got a few more to do. But this is how this work goes. I mean, the footer here isn't even all that difficult compared to the other parts that we did above. But what we can do is just realize that when we want to make something overall that's what looks busy, it's actually not if you can reuse sections like above, where we built one that took a while, but then we could use it over and over for every other category so that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel over and over and over again. So this one, copy, we'll just make it easy and just paste all of them. And then we can just change it over, move over and change it to just paragraphs. And then all it is purging all the links real quick. But this way you can come back through really easy and just re-link things and get yourself up and running. I don't suggest cloning anybody, but the skills you learn when you do clones like this are the skills that help you make truly unique and high quality websites that other people won't do. And that way you stop looking like you're running popcorn, and now you're running my affiliate authority site layout, which is just going to make you look much better, leaps and bounds over all the competition who's just basically going to do the same problem and clone things over and over and over again and just really look amateurish comparatively. So this one, we got that learn to grow, and I wouldn't make that a header personally, so I would just scale up the font really big. And then basically what we can do is just do the little tweaks to kind of make things look bigger and more on color. So white font again, black background again by unselecting white. There we go. Now we can grab that other phrase. And then really here I is where we're basically done, because otherwise it's just a logo and custom HTML for a form. So what we can do is just fill it in with a placeholder and another image, and I'll be right back when I grab them. So we're just going to grab a quick screen cap of this just to save our time, because it's the SVG again, so we can't really save it. So we're just going to screen cap it and then just put it in here real quick. So otherwise we just adjust that down. It's not a perfect background color, but it's just basically representing what this could look like. The background probably is a match to that black, and we could tweak it a little bit to get that last little bit, but this represents getting that footer in place, because you'd have a logo that you'd have down there, preferably transparent PNG, and then an email above it. And while on the front end they don't look the same because they're placeholder, they're representative of what you would want to have down there, and that way it would look exactly like that part. So the showcase here, as you see, has us go through the hero, the sticky, editor's picks, and then we move on to the featured reads section, which is all the different topics, so each category that you want to drive, and then a latest post for just your most recent 10 posts, and then a link that takes you to all your blog posts, and then the footer. Alright, so this is for those people who are left, where you get everything, where you get your money's worth, right? So when you look at these kind of things, you gotta scroll through responsive design, and you start to see where it starts to break down a little bit, because you gotta tweak some stuff within Gutenberg when you're building sometimes, just to make sure you handle these one-offs. And really you can just see some stuff goes a little bit too long, and because it's so long it breaks down the containers it's in. So really we have to fix the images, because they're a fixed size that I made a fixed width and height on purpose. This is where scaling can be smart and using percents instead of actual numbers. But you can easily fix that by just adding in So like this is a media query, so basically anything that's going to be screen up to 1024 pixels, so basically tablets. And from here really we're just going to do some cleanup on specific parts where we've gone too big, and we've just got to go inspect the chunks. So like on his display, these social icons are gone on anything smaller than 1024. So for us, we can go ahead and target these, and we can hide the links, and that solves one problem. And then every time you do this, you want to save, because like some of these things are actually lists that are hidden, so when you try and test it, it won't actually go away even though you think it should. So like, see, they're still there right now. So then really what you want to do is try and understand what it's looking for, and more than likely what it is that is actually unorganized list, UL from the code, kind of like your navigation is. It's not a bulleted list, so we just need to go find it and then go clear up that one to get it right. So more than likely you got to just go double check, and when you go look and see, you can just inspect everything and go find if you've targeted the right thing, and more than likely you'll be able to also look at what's there and append or post-pen what you need to clean up the actual problem. So if you look right here, then you can start looking at this, and you'll see that it's a UL before it. So what we probably need to do is actually just grab that section to get this right. So, and then what we want is none, right? And it's not working. So really what we need to do is put that UL back on the front, and then look, you can see it start to go away. So UL, there you go, gone. So that's what we actually needed inside there. It's just to add the UL beforehand. So now when you're cleaning up and you go in to inspect, if you go under 1024 pixels, it will just disappear. So as we scroll in, boom, gone. See? So now you've cleaned up that first section of something that's obviously an issue itself. And then the next thing we can do is move on to the images to try and get ourselves, so right at 25. There we go. So that proves that part is working. So now really what we've got to do is start looking at the next part that's broken and just work our way piece by piece through. It's slow and methodical, but it's what happens when you're trying to design and make sure it's going to work everywhere. So what we need to do is just go take a look at these and draw it back out, and when you go look at it, you'll see that it has a height and a width set. So what we need to do is basically go change these from being that width and height, so that way they are styling themselves with this better. So because right now obviously this is breaking what we're doing. So since we have a sticky hover class on there, there's a lot of ways we could approach this itself, but we're going to go ahead and just go with the featured image and try and use this first. What we can do is just go make another one and then just kind of rescale to try and see what we can set this to. And easiest way is always to try and set like a fixed percent and try and force it into correct sizing. So what we need to do though is take a look at this and make sure we're tagging the image itself. And then what we need to do is go figure out what we need it to be at, which is width at 100%, because we want it all the way across the space. What we need is the height to be controlled, because right now the height is just a fixed one, which is breaking all of the pieces. So when you look at it, it's always staying the same height, and it's just making them overlay each other. So what you can do is try and fix the width problem by adjusting the height problem. But instead I want to show you can do some of that in here instead if you were really looking into this to do it all the time and take a look and see. So instead of having, you know, fixed settings, you can go in here and tweak some of this specifically to clean up the image size. So even though we initially had set a size, what we actually can do is just go into here, and if we pull out the sizes now, they should actually have been fixed because the space is already contained. So if you pull those out, now when you go take a look at the front end, they'll self-clean up. So we can go scroll down. What'll happen is you're going to see this section's messed up. We'll come to the grid later. But we can do that same cleanup because they all share that same image basically through all of our templates. So we can scroll past this and go clean up those other sections pretty fast because the editor's picks uses different setup, so we won't worry about it until afterwards. But each of these sections, we can go fix this image inside these columns real quick. Instead of deviating back, we can go clean this up because we know if we pull out the scale stuff, it'll self-resolve our images fitting within there. And then when we refresh, when we scroll down, those are still going to be broken, but these start to look good again, right? So when we go back, now we can start looking at the next one and the next one, and we can start getting these better. So if we scroll down, we go to the next image, and inside this image we do the same thing. We purge out these numbers. We scroll down and we purge out the numbers. This is the repetitive nature sometimes of when you've made decisions to make fixed widths, and then you either can try and CSS them all the way or you can try and fix your widths. So now you can see they all look good on the front end still, and these ones, when the next post comes in, it's going to sit to the side just perfectly. And then we've got this latest post section, which has got the same problem as the others. It's got a set height and width, which is just messing with us. We didn't need to do that. We were trying to make it perfect, and now it's about perfect, and we can actually go fix the spacing pretty easily because inside the group we can just go into that same spacing inside the inside the post template, the spacing, to give it that gap, and then refresh, and we get that gap back again, and it just is cleaner and it'll run at any size much better. And then what we can do is look at this editor side, because this is the painful part of trying to get this all right. So the editor's broken. We're going to have to do some play to get that to work out correctly. We may still defer on this side. We'll go ahead and inspect and look at some of the other parts. That part is probably the biggest headache waiting to happen. So now when we look at this, most of this is working just fine. As you see, it's starting to scroll. We could probably have a little bit of spacing up top because that grow gets a little bit close to the top. So if we scroll all the way to the top, we can go to that group and add some padding top and bottom on the group itself to make sure that there's still plenty of space. Because we need that having a little bit of gap at least, so if it ends up on its own there, that it's got some kind of breathing room. And you'll see it looks a lot cleaner there. So the real site does something similar. So I mean, we're kind of happy with that and how ours is working then. So we can look at this in that little green section, but it's a minimal thing. As we scroll down, take a look and see. And note that it's got that little teeny gap to the side. But what we can do there is just kind of clean up. And if we really want to, we can just hide it when it gets to a lower resolution. So now you can see it fits on there without any size, and just save ourselves setting all these sizes for ourselves. We can add a class so we can easily not display it afterwards. So we'll just name it hero-svg for ease, or yeah, we'll do angle just because then it makes more sense. Okay, so when you come in here, then you can easily go add it real quick as just enter, and then it's dot, just like it would be for other things. So then you can adjust it. So in this case, it's got a teensy gap, so like we can tweak it so that we move it a little bit backwards. And since I'm voiceovering this last section, it really should have gone with padding left, or sorry, not with padding left, it should be margin left. And then you'll see I corrected it here right afterwards when I realized I'd gone the wrong way. So that just moves that back in place and helps make sure that it's in the right place and there's no gap in between. It's just a little cleanup that you can do to make sure everything looks as nice as you can possibly get it to be. But now that it exists, it's easy to control if we ever want to. So what we've got left is just to go tweak it a little bit. So we can go -1 as important, and as long as we're tied to the image, we get the actual movement. So we can actually copy this and put it back in place just to get rid of that weird little 1 pixel buffer that you could see the line for. This way it's just cleaned up. But we can also then go ahead and reuse the same thing to just go ahead and hide it inside when it drops underneath the 1024, because there's no point to keeping that showing up afterwards. So instead of margin left, we're just going to delete all this out and just display and then :none. So basically, as soon as we drop to 1024 pixels, that SVG is just going to disappear, which will work out probably better for us in the long term. That way, when you're looking around, you will have less weirdness itself. So their side is a little bit less tall than ours. That's more due to the fact that we set some of these, and now we're kind of stuck trying to figure out if we want to make them bigger or smaller. I think what we'll do is go ahead and go to the cover image, and we're just going to make a CSS class so we can limit this to a maximum of 50% of the screen height. So we'll make it, hero and then cover image, and we can use this to basically force it to be no higher than 50% of the screen size on desktop. And we can do that by just adding it here and then setting a height for the image itself of 50 VH. So what this will do is this will shrink that right up. It'll also break our SVG a little bit, but we can fix that. This way it's kind of got a little bit better screen real estate size though, and it's much better for us to have some kind of control over how tall this will end up actually being. So really, in the end, once you start down this rabbit hole, you're gonna have to play with a lot of stuff, because then the stuff that I'd scaled and made right is kind of not right, and you can fix it all. I have this whole thing in here where I fixed it. Basically, you're gonna have to go play with some of the CSS to go fix it and make it the right size, and instead of it may have been better to just leave it as it was and keep it with that extra little bit of height over trying to micro fix this many pieces. I'm going to leave it in because I think it helps everybody look at troubleshooting and trying to work through a solution, because it is definitely irritating when you're trying to go through and work it out when you don't have it available right away as an answer. And I think this was still really almost 20 minutes of me fixing this after the fact. But in the end, it kind of helps anybody who's watched this far along actually see all the little things that go into this. And me telling you exactly how to fix it and just cutting past all this doesn't really show all the things that you have to go through sometimes to try and work out how to do something the best way. And that there's always, 100 different ways to skin the cat, and that what I tried to do, because I thought it would be helpful, just ended up making this worse. And then you have to go in and you have to do a lot of play to go repair what was there, when you should never have to do that in the first place. So in this case, it kind of keeps going and it moves through. I'm going to speed up this section to 2x speed so you can drop it down to 50% speed and play it at normal. But I want to move through this chunk just because it's more about learning, and most people who made it this far will have no problem changing the browser speed for YouTube down to 50% to watch it.